Well, today's Prime Ministerial announcement of a 50% cut in overseas arrivals to try and avoid more COVID breakouts was on one level a disappointing cave-in to the Labor premiers who, despite what they say, have no faith in their quarantine and tracing systems. But on another level, this concession by the Prime Minister was a small price to pay for an at least in principle agreement from the premiers on a pathway back to normal life. And today's big announcement had the overall result of Scott Morrison finally seeming more in charge of Australia's COVID response than he has in months. Don't underestimate how much the premiers have revelled in their elevated status over the past 18 months, with the nation hanging on their daily announcements of new cases, their instructions from on high on how we're all supposed to live or not live our lives. So getting them to agree, even on a broad plan out of this, what was by no means a poor achievement, even if the details are yet to be worked out, like the precise vaccination rates at which we'll move from locking down cities when we only have a couple of COVID cases to locking down cities when only we have significant hospitalisations. As the Prime Minister put it today, we're currently in phase 1 of Australia's pathway out of COVID. Essentially, this means totally suppressing the disease while trying to get everyone vaccinated. But even in phase 1, there will be a trial of shorter quarantine periods and even home quarantine for those fully vaccinated returning travellers. By the beginning of next year, so still a long way off, says the Prime Minister, by which time everyone will have at least had a chance to be vaccinated. We should be in phase 2, with lockdowns only as a last resort and moving towards phase 3. Now, phase 3, thanks to high vaccination rates plus booster shots, COVID, we're told, should be no more dangerous than the flu. Vaccinated people should be able to freely leave the country, no quarantine on return, at least from bubble countries, and there should be no more lockdowns whatsoever. Finally, in phase 4, things, we're told, will be back to normal. With life and travel happening as before, it won't just be COVID normal either, because by then, COVID will be just another disease, albeit one that might require some ongoing vaccinations, but just another disease. Now, the key issue, of course, is whether the PM can actually deliver these 4 phases, whether the premiers will act in their own jurisdictions in accordance with their agreements around the National Cabinet table today. Can we trust them to keep state borders open, for instance, when there's a chance to show how tough they are by closing them? Can we trust them and their chief health officers to resist the chance to catastrophise other variants like the so-called deadly Delta, which are more transmissible even though less dangerous? Back in November, don't forget, National Cabinet published a framework, they called it, a framework for national reopening that specified an end to lockdowns and state border closures by last Christmas. We all know how that's turned out. And the key question, the magic number, in fact, that's the vaccination rate at which it'll be deemed sufficient to move from one phase to another. Is that 70% of Australians vaccinated? 80%? Perhaps only 50% like the United States? We don't know the number yet, with the Prime Minister today saying that this number is still subject to the inevitable further expert advice. Still, by Friday night, tonight, this is progress, even if it's slow and still a little uncertain. It might not be Singapore, which has dispensed with the daily dirge about new cases altogether and is already treating COVID like the flu based on just 35% of fully vaccinated Singaporeans. But then Singapore is almost a one-party city-state, not a fractious federation with premiers on a power trip. So if there's one message out of today, we all head into the weekend, some of you I know in the second week of your lockdown, is that we've all just got to get vaccinated as quickly as possible so that panicky premiers have less and less excuse to lock us up. Thanks to his efforts today, it seems like the PM just might have nudged them in the right direction. Whether they keep going in that right direction, who knows? These are the premiers after all.